in a war with Venezuela. If you want to stop the drugs, you stop them when they enter your territorial waters or they try to cross your borders. If you want the drug problem to go away, then you crack down inside the United States. You enforce federal law. We watched this massive demonstration of no king's business, and I'm beginning to be told by people in the intelligence business that the same people that funded Antifa and the George Floyd business are now funding the no kings nonsense. What they don't understand is that this is about enforcing federal law inside the United States. That's what we need to do. We need to enforce federal law. We need to enforce state law. We have not been enforcing our laws. If you don't enforce your laws, one of two things has to happen. You go out of business. Your society collapses. Your nation dissipates, disintegrates, or you change the laws. Now, I don't think Americans voted for open borders, but they got them. And nothing has really been done to the people that did that to us. The decision to open our borders and admit millions of people about whom we knew nothing and didn't need in this country at all for any reason has never been challenged. No one has ever stood up and said, well, who are the culprits? Who are the people that did this to us? I mean, President Trump talks about the Venezuelan gang members that are here in the United States. He's 100% right. And I agree 100% with the actions taken thus far by the FBI and ICE and other agencies in the Department of Homeland Security and Justice to deal with them harshly. I'm 100% for that. But that's very different from declaring war on a foreign country whose role in all of this, frankly, in Venezuela is minuscule. I mean, anyone will tell you that. Colombia, yes. Ecuador, yes. And there's some others.
But China, India are even bigger than.
Yeah, but I mean, China, are you going to solve the problem by bombing China or bombing India?
Exactly. Exactly the point.
And these nations, when you talk about India and China, there are over 1 billion people in these countries. Does everyone really think that the Indian government and the Chinese government are cultivating and encouraging lawlessness? No, they're not. But you're dealing with nations that are very, very large and difficult to control. You know, I would prefer they did the policing, and I would encourage them to police to the best of their ability. I don't want to police those places. I don't want to govern those places. If you go into Venezuela, you're going to have to police the place. You know, it's like I think it was the Minister of Defense from Italy who told the Supreme Commander of Allied Powers Europe back in 1998, you know, if we go into Kosovo, we will replace the Serbs. We don't want to replace the Serbs. We have enough Albanians as it is. We don't want to govern Albanians. We don't want to administer them. Well, the same thing holds true on a much larger and more dangerous scale in a place like Venezuela. And the other thing is that all these surrounding countries in Latin America, they've already been primed through various kinds of information, education, socialization to say, here we go again. The evil Yankees are back, doing more dangerous things to us. I mean, it's sort of like sending the British Army to the Republic of Ireland. What a dumb idea that would be. Every Irishman would rise up in rebellion, and with good reason. We're inviting stupidity and disaster.
So, Doug, let me ask you, you're right, because I looked just earlier this past week. When you rank the countries of origin where drugs are entering illegally into the United States, Venezuela is number 20. So if it's that low down on the list, why are we putting so much effort in? Why is Lindsey Graham just pounding the desk talking about, let's go take him out? Why would we do something like that on someone who's that small? Is it as simple as there's oil in Venezuela?
Well, a lot of it has to do with natural resources. There's no question about it. But I think you also have a flight of fantasy on the strategic level in Washington. Just as we used to listen to people all the time say, well, we have to split Russia and China. If we can split them, then we can bring in Russia on our side against China. This is, you know, what do you think this is, 1870? 1900? It's not. It's ridiculous. It's silly nonsense. Today, economic power is far more important than military power. And what we've forgotten is that as your economic strength and productivity declines, your military power falls behind.
Right with it, yeah.
So, but we're not thinking in those terms. And so, this is almost gunboat diplomacy on the style of, or in the style of Teddy Roosevelt. Well, we'll send a few gunboats and we'll send a battalion of Marines and we'll beat these people into submission. This is not going to work. It's a prescription for failure. But we have people strategically convincing themselves, well, we're flipping the board on Russia and China. They thought they were going to get into Venezuela. Well, they won't get there because we'll be there. I remember Nicaragua. Nobody today remembers much about Nicaragua. Back in the 80s under Reagan, there were all sorts of people, sadly, that I knew in the United States Army. Oh, this is great. Let's go into Nicaragua. And they thought, well, this is the dream of the light infantry community. We'll send in the light divisions. That's what they're there for. And a friend of mine who will remain nameless, but who is familiar with the region and thought strategically, he said, well, if I were the Soviets, I'd send a brigade of Soviet military police to direct U.S. traffic into Nicaragua. What a catastrophe that will be. We'll go there, we'll spend huge quantities of money, a lot of people will get killed, absolutely nothing will be achieved. We've got to get back to something that we never hear anymore, which used to be popular in the medical community. It was, first, do no harm. Don't perform surgery unless it's absolutely necessary. Any surgery is by nature intrusive. As soon as it's intrusive, you risk all sorts of problems. Infection, more disease, accidents. So surgery is your last option. We've made surgery on the international level our first option. And going into Venezuela is not going to fundamentally change anything strategically in our favor. Now, the people that think they're going to get control of all the oil and natural gas, and maybe they're going to march inland and get those gold mines and emerald mines, I don't know. But if you try to do that, how long is it before suddenly some of these oil derricks begin to blow up? How long before your soldiers that are policing the area in some of the areas of Caracas start dying? In other words, you're inviting disaster. This just doesn't make any sense. And how many times have we told, oh, this will be a cakewalk? That's one of the reasons I talked about the generals. Beware of these generals. If you're president of the United States, beware of the general who walks in and says, come on, boss, we can do it. We've got it. We'll get the job done. Give us the mission. Okay, who are these people? Well, I mentioned a couple. One was a general division commander in 1950 in Korea. And he predicted that once his troops landed in Korea, that the North Koreans would be so shocked and afraid they'd run away. Okay. Max Hastings, the historian that's written so many books on these things, said that the rout of the 24th Infantry Division in 1950 in Korea was so complete, it resembled the disintegration of the French in 1940 and the British in Singapore. So much for that. Then you had this man, Paul Harkins. He was Patton's G3 towards the end of the Second World War. He was a 4-star, and he was the first commander of this Military Assistance Command Vietnam. And he said, well, we can win this war by by Christmas of 1963. The South Vietnamese troops are great. They're doing a brilliant job and so forth. Well, they had some battles with the VC and they lost. So he reported those as victories because that was the message his bosses in Washington wanted to hear. So I said, this really wasn't a defeat, a minor setback, but in truth, it was a victory. Have you heard that kind of logic before? We left triumphant from Afghanistan. We were victorious, right? And then we have this General Donahue, who was one of the architects of the triumphal retreat from Afghanistan, who says, well, we can overrun and take Kaliningrad in what, 2 days? 24, 48 hours. I know we can do this.
It'd be easy, I think is how he put it.
Really? What planet are these people on? And if you're president of the United States and you have people like that with 3 and 4 stars on their shoulders saying stupid remarks like that, you should be very afraid because that doesn't pass the common sense test. I think we're hearing the same crap about Venezuela. And then if you stand up and you point to the obvious, these are the reasons why you don't want to go in there and you don't want to stay. I mean, for instance, in Iraq, one of the things I've got to give people credit for in 2002 when I talked to them down in Central Command, is that the leadership in the Army, at least at the top of Central Command, understood you don't want to stay in Iraq. If you go in there, you go in, you execute the mission, put another bunch of generals in charge, and you get out. You don't stay. Now, we all know what actually happened. But people say, well, why wasn't there a plan to occupy Iraq? Because we didn't have a spare million men to send to do it. And we didn't want to do it. And we knew it was a disastrous idea. We did it. It was a disaster. My point is, President Trump needs to sit quietly in a room and think about all of this, and then ask, what kinds of people am I dealing with? The people that tell me, oh, this is easy. This is a cakewalk. We can bully these people to our heart's content. And ask, is that really true? Is that really in our interest? Is that really what we need to do? I mean, you saw him in the Oval Office where he was asked point blank, we understand that President Maduro made an offer to you about a stake in the oil and gas industries in Venezuela. Was that not true? Oh, yes, he did. He offered everything. Well, why isn't that enough?
Yeah.
Well, that's not enough. What isn't enough? What do you want? You know, we're in a very dangerous position right now. I don't know where we'll be in 6 months or 12 months, but if we end up where I think we're going, he's in a lot of trouble. And he's only been president for less than a year.
That's the big issue there. It's because, like you said at the start of this, you have the piece that he's already taken full credit for, that it hasn't even had phase two negotiated yet. It's far from certain that's even going to stay stable. You obviously have the situation of Russia, Ukraine, that you could definitely go all the way against Ukraine. Probably will, given enough time. And then now this one down here, if we get into there, if all of these go bad on his watch, it's going to be pretty tough to get anything done, to even make it through 4 years and not be removed from office one way or the other. It's that serious, I think.
And we have not talked at all about the supposedly irrelevant national sovereign debt. I mean, somebody pointed out to me the other day, don't you understand that private debt is even worse than public debt? Sure. But the public debt is important because when it collapses, when it crashes, you have no government. There is no administration. Everything stops. Who's paying the police? Who pays the bureaucrats to do their jobs? In other words, the potential for apocalyptic change as a result of financial collapse is real. Nassim Taleb, who's talked about this in great detail, and many, many others, have warned this sort of thing. We need some rationality in Washington. We need to understand that the problems that we confront at home are far more serious and existential than anything happening overseas. And going somewhere else to fight another war is not a solution. You know, you would think after the No Kings demonstrations, even though I find the funding of all of this reprehensible, and we've begun to figure out who's behind it. Nevertheless, look at that and understand the potential for unrest inside the United States. Why do you want to court this sort of thing with action overseas in other people's countries?
Right. And by the way, I want to be very clear, make sure nobody misunderstands what I was saying. I'm not saying that President Trump needs to worry about somebody else coming in and taking from power. I'm actually talking about his own supporters, and I'm talking about by existing legislative means. There are ways to get that done. That if he loses the support of his own side, and he can, if they finally start paying enough of a price, and especially if you overlay on the economic issue that causes problems inside, there's going to be some real trouble. So I think that the wise thing to do is to recognize these things, just like you suggested. I'm a strong advocate of that. And let's change some policies while we still have a time to navigate this to avoid some of the worst outcomes.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And in this connection, I would let the Europeans stew in their own juices. And eventually the European peoples will take care of the problem. We don't need to do it.
Yeah, and but it turns out that Gary's always on top of it, like he is. And you mentioned that soundbite from President Trump in the Oval Office the other day. Gary found it.
Maduro offered everything in his country, all the natural resources. He even recorded a message to you in English recently, offering mediation. What should we do in order to stop that?
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to fuck around with the United States.
Pretty harsh language there. But the bigger question remains: if that be true, and you recognize it, then we don't need to be going down Lindsey Graham's route. That's not necessary. So we'll have to wait and see how that's going to play out.
Yeah. Well, remember the Serbs met 90% of the conditions outlined for them by the Austrians in Vienna in 1914. It wasn't good enough. It was absolutely enough, but they rejected it, and we know the rest is history. You got to be very careful about these kinds of things.
Indeed.
Now is not to be incautious.
Yeah, and wise. With take the win. Bottom line, take the win when you've got it.
Exactly.
Well, listen, we really appreciate you.
Venezuela is.
Here is the soundbite from Lindsey Graham that they're referencing. This guy, the senator from South Carolina, is absolutely reprehensible. And I don't know why the good people of South Carolina keep putting this guy in office who's causing more harm and just pleading for people to die. Watch how disgusting this is.
It's a narco-terrorism state run by Maduro, who's had associations with Iran. He steals from his own people. It is a staging area to bring drugs into this country. And when you voted for Donald Trump, here's what you voted for.
Watch this.
Mr. President, there's a speedboat headed to America full of drugs. What should we do?
Watch this.
Blow it up. But we're going to the next step. We're just not going to blow up the boat. We're going after the people who load the boat and the country that provides safe haven to the narco-terrorists who run.
All right, I can't listen to this guy anymore. He's absolutely disgusting. Now they're blowing up our military. The United States military is blowing up boats in international water, absent any form of due process of law. In fact, you're not even allowed to apprehend a boat in international water. You have to wait till it comes into your own territorial waters. And then after a warning, you tell them, we are going to board your boat. And that's if you suspect that there's some contraband or some nefarious illegal activity. And you give them a warning, you're going to board the boat. And if they don't heed, then you can do, depending on your rules of engagement. But normally what the Coast Guard does, they fire, warning shots across the bow to make sure they understand that they want them to stop. They heed them and hail them again. If they don't stop again, then the pursuit is on. Typically they stop. And then you board them. You find contraband or illegal stuff on board. You seize that. You seize the people. You gather the evidence. They do this meticulously. The Coast Guard is very good at doing this. They're the only ones in our part of our military that are supposed to be doing this. I've done many board and searches in the Navy, and it's a very dangerous situation. And that's when you start your legal case. If they're in our territorial waters of the United States, the international law and the maritime laws allow you to do that. So you can protect your homeland. But you don't do it 1,200 miles away when they probably have somebody just said, hey, there's a boat, we think they're carrying contraband, and kill them all. That's not how international law works. That's not how the United States law works. Nobody's law works that way, except, I guess, President Trump and Lindsey Graham support that, I guess. But anyway, I do not support it, and neither should you. This clip was originally aired, as you can tell at the top, October 20th, 2023. I'm making this video on the 21st. So he said this yesterday, Monday, the 20th of October. And the video, I'm going to post the video links of where I, recorded this from Daniel Davis Deep Dive. And Doug MacGregor was the colonel speaking on there. And I'll put his YouTube channel where I got this. Thanks to both you guys for putting this out and speaking to sanity, because I don't hear too many people speaking to sanity right now. Pretty soon this country's going to be on the verge of rebellion, which I don't want to see, but by our Constitution, we can do that. It is put in there that people can reform its government if it doesn't, support the will of the people. And right now, I don't think our government is supporting the will of the general population of America. They're certainly not supporting my will. If it was up to me, I would depopulate all 800 military bases overseas, bring our people home, adhere to the rule of law in this country. The laws are not bad. The laws in this country don't need to be changed. If they do, there's a process to do that. You can do jury nullification. You can request it through the legislature. There's all kinds of ways you can make a bad law go away. And apparently our Congress doesn't have a problem in creating and inventing new ones, which I don't think at this point need to be going on anymore anyways. And so we need to reform inside our borders. We need to crack down if the drugs are a problem, which they are. We should take care of that within our own border where the problem exists. You can't go outside your border and start killing people. That's not how it works. Also, there needs to be a lot of reforms done within our own country. Our standard of living could be so much better than what it is. You could actually go back to how it was in the 50s, where you had one breadwinner in the family, and you had a stay-at-home mom. If she wanted to, she could, financially, was able to do that. Raise the kids, have a strong nucleus family where strong family values can be adhered to, and you don't have both parents working and the kids in daycare. That ain't how it's supposed to be, people. But that's how it is. It ain't supposed to be where you have, if you're working an average job, you're a middle income earner, where you have to decide whether you're going to pay your mortgage or you're going to put gas in your car. With two incomes in the house. That is not how America was set up. But due to all this flagrant funding, these 3 or 4 or 5 wars we got going on right now, there could be so many changes made that would benefit we the people. And I don't want to see a rebellion, but it's looking like more and more it could happen. And if it does, I will participate, because I have read and become very, very, very familiar with the federal Constitution and the Virginia Constitution where I live. And both constitutions allow for rebellion. You can do it on the local level, the state level, or the federal level. And I'm pretty sure it's probably in all the other 49 states too in their constitution. And if it's not, it should be, because it's in the federal Constitution. So anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox. I got dinner to cook. It is Tuesday, 21 October 2025 at about 16:30 or 4:30 for you folks. And have a good day. Peace.